I'm Carrie Peters, a recognized thought leader in the Microsoft Dynamics community and a Microsoft MVP for business applications. Welcome to the Get Your New View podcast. Keep listening to learn how we work with frustrated Business Central and NAV users who struggle to use their system and find the answers that they need. We teach them to truly understand how the system can support their business processes to make immediate and lasting improvements. As a result, they get more done in less time, make better business decisions, and even love their system. In this next season of the Get Your New View podcast, I'd like you to meet even more members of our New View team who have brought examples of their favorite projects they've worked on with our customers to create efficiencies, utilize automation, and simply use even more of the features of their Business Central software. Everybody, I'd love to welcome Kim Congleton, our Chief Operating Officer of New View Strategies, to the podcast. And I've asked her to come here today to talk about how we can create improvements with Business Central through system administration. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Carrie.
Welcome to our podcast. I'm excited to talk to you about this because this particular topic's a little bit different. It's not quite so obvious how we can create improvements with system administration unless you're somebody like you who specializes in this.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I kind of like it. It is where I started my career at.
Yep.
It's an area I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's one of those areas that are forgotten about, and especially if you have a small team, like a small IT team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we do when we talk about how we create improvements for our customers or people who are looking to work with us is we talk about the idea of doing an assessment of their system. We talk about doing an assessment of their system. And as we go through that, you've got a certain checklist that you use related to system admin things in particular that you're looking for to make sure that they're using that to its fullest. So can you tell us a little bit about the things that you have on that list?
Yeah, so there's some really easy things to check, right? And there are a lot of times quick wins that we can help our clients with. And one of them is always, number one, is everybody super? So I like to, does everybody have the super permissions? And, I like to tell people this is not Oprah. We do not, everybody does not get super. It's not like you get super and you get super. Because people ultimately don't want to do bad things, but if everybody in the system is super, bad things can definitely happen if you don't know what to do with that. So that's the number one thing that I go in and check for, because that's a really easy thing to help somebody with and really can make a big difference in the administration of the system. So, it's a great opportunity for training. We can train people how to use the permissions recorder and to properly set up permissions. A lot of times it'll make your auditor a lot happier. If if you're public, it's going to make that auditor really happy. If you're a private company and still do an audit, it'll also make those auditors happy as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of risk to having somebody be super or having everybody be super, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So what kind of things have you seen that have happened when you've had too many people be super in the system?
Oh boy. We had somebody, there's so many. It's so hard to pick like one or two. We had somebody that was, it was one company I was working with. The system they came off of, and this was back in the NAV days, right, where, typically like F4 would be save, or I always forget it was kind of backwards, right? In the old system, F4 was save, and in the new system, it was delete. So this person was going in and deleting records without really recognizing that they were deleting things because they had the permission to do that, when really they probably should have just had read-write permission to the different customers.
Yep. Yeah, great example. And this is something that they can fix after their implementation. It's not just an implementation only kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times it is phase two, because a lot of times if you don't do your permissions up front, like I always recommend doing your permissions before you go live. And that last round of testing that you do before you go live, you test with your real permissions, because there's nothing worse than getting to go live and everybody's calling saying, I can't do this. And then you just give them super because you don't have time to figure out what permission they're missing. Another thing that we've seen people do is change the settings on like some of the setup tables. So, oh, I don't have access to post this month. Well, let me just go in, or I'm trying to post a document back into a different month. Oh, so let me go just update in general ledger setup my posting to and from dates, and then not realizing that has now messed up the whole financials. So that super permission can be pretty dangerous if you don't know what you're doing with it.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. Well, that sounds like a good one to have on the list. What else is on the list?
Well, we just talked about general ledger setup table.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to go in and check that people are using the to and from dates. You and I actually both worked on a client together who did not have those set. So as a result, there was some things that were posted in 1940. And then there was something posted in 2032. Yeah. So if you don't have those dates set, you can do some things that will cause your financials to change, or you'll do an entry like that. And then you're like, why do my financials not match? And then you're like, oh, geez, something's posted in 2032. And it can take a while to find that.
Yeah.
Well, if you're me, it can take a while to find that. It doesn't take you that long to find that because you'll do that. But, you get where I'm going.
I sure do. No, that I remember that we solved a big problem for them because not only did they have some weird postings way out of range on either end, but they also had continually changing financial periods for periods they'd already closed, and that solved the mystery completely.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a key one I always like to check and make sure they're using. And then kind of the next step of that is if there are people like accountants that typically do maybe have to post back at the most 1 month or two. I don't know. I forget what you always tell them.
Yep.
But that you're using those then using at the user level, the to and from dates.
Yep. Yeah. I always tell them the prior month and the current month only. Nobody needs more access than that as long as they're closing their month quickly. So
exactly.
Very good.
Exactly.
So when you assess the situation, you're looking for system admin type of things to recommend. What else are recommendations that you make?
Yeah, so we do check all the setup tables. One of the other ones I like to check that, since I'm a warehouse person, I always like to check and see if they allow negative inventory. I am not a huge fan of negative inventory. So that's an easy one to check. And along with that, checking, that you're always specifying a location when you're creating a sales order or purchase order. I get that there's some things, like GL setups or GL, if you're using a GL, maybe you don't want to do a location, but I find it really can mess up your sales orders if you're not saying you should always set a location. So that's another one. So checking all those setup tables to make sure that, there's nothing that looks weird, there's things they shouldn't be using, maybe depending on what their industry is or how their processes are, or seeing if there's something new they could turn on that they're not taking advantage of. Mm-hmm. So, it takes a little bit of time just to run through those setups and then kind of review that with them and make some recommendations. The other one that is always fun to look at is the change log. Mm-hmm. So I always like to see what people have set in the change log. This can frequently be an issue if they're running nav on premise and, in the, any of the old SQL versions. If they're having performance issues, that's probably one of the first things that I'll check. So we had a recent client a couple years ago who, when we looked at it, they were saying they had performance issues. And, first thing I do is go in and look at the change log. And so I went and saw that they had everything turned on for the sales header and the sales line to track insert, create, and modify.
Wow.
Or delete. So the insert, modify, and delete were all turned on, and it was generating a ton of records. They also had a customization that was generating a ton of records too. So when we looked at it, there were over 12 million records in this table, and that was just for that year alone. So that can seriously impact your your environment. And we typically recommend not tracking at transactions. So, there has to be a really, really good reason, and I've yet to hear a good reason. So, there's the archive function. If you want to know what another version of the sales order was, you can always turn on the archive version. So those things we kind of check quite a bit.
Yep. That's a great list. So when you think of those in particular, how do you organize putting that into place for a customer who's not using any of that yet? How do you deal with that as a project?
Yeah, so what we'll do, and our philosophy is we always want to teach people to fish. We just don't want to give them the fish. So I always, in those scenarios, we'll kind of run through the setup screens with them, especially if they're not using those general ledger settings. We'll run through the setup screens first. I like to kind of go top down. So to me, that's kind of the hierarchy. You really need to make sure those setups are proper. So it's kind of a workshop type situation that we'll do. And then the next I would tackle would be the permissions. Again, just because if you're looking at the hierarchy, that's the next level where things can really go badly for you. And what we'll do there too is kind of do a workshop type training. So we might pick these three sets of permissions are really, kind of most important. We want to make sure that somebody that can enter a purchase order cannot create a vendor and cut a check. So, that whole concept of segregation of duties, the accountants really like it when we make sure as IT that doesn't happen. So a lot of times we'll pick 3 or 4 permission sets and kind of walk them through, here we might create the first one, show you how it's done, and then have them create the second one while we're watching and kind of helping them do that. So, and we really, if we're using a version of NAV or BC that has their permissions recorder, I know there's some people that either love it or hate it, but I can tell you if you've ever done permissions without the permissions recorder, it can be hours to actually create, the proper permission set. I find if you can, get the person to actually record the steps that they're doing, then maybe I've got to add on, maybe I've got to tweak it a little bit, but it's going to at least save me a couple of hours of time doing it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Much less guesswork involved.
Yeah. Yep.
Very good. So as you think about customers who need to focus on some system administration, what are symptoms that they should be looking for that would indicate that they should pay a little attention to this area in particular?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one is performance in the older versions. That's always kind of an indicator that there might be something wrong somewhere in the setup. 2 would be, I can't tell why something happened. That's kind of the next thing. If they say, I don't know why my financials are changing, first thing we're going to look at is posting dates. But then the next thing you might look at is posting setups, right? So, and this that area kind of bleeds over. I feel like it's a little bit of IT just saying, I think accounting, Kay, can we have you look at the posting groups? Because if you're telling me you don't know, why somebody something posted where it posted, then I feel like that's a collaboration between IT and finance. But, it's also a symptom of something might not be set up right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So if we have somebody who's considering paying a little extra attention to system administration, so how difficult is it for them to get organized, to get working on that? What would they need to do to start working with us?
The assessment is usually how that engagement starts for sure. And it usually will be, especially, usually it is a smaller, maybe a little bit smaller company that doesn't have one person dedicated full-time to that IT function. So, a lot of times in those smaller organizations, it's, maybe somebody in accounting that kind of doubles as the admin. So, the assessment is the first step because we're going to look at that, but we're also going to look at so many of your other processes that get impacted by some of those setups.
Yep. So it's something that they could include with other improvements that they work on as a continuous improvement project overall.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Great. Any other thoughts to share with those who are listening about system administration and what people should be thinking about?
Oh, wow. There's so many. I think that it's one of those things that gets neglected. So often people implement and we don't actually go back and look at those setups and maybe look at how we're maintaining data. And I like to kind of think about it like spring cleaning, right? I should do spring cleaning at least once a year, if not twice, that kind of deep cleaning. And I feel like with your system, you kind of should do some of that too. And that's where kind of the systems admin umbrella, always falls. So, always reviewing your setups, reviewing your master data, making sure I don't have a sales order that's open from like 5 years ago. I actually worked on one client. They had one that was like 20 or not 20, but like 10 years old. And I'm like, really? Like, I don't think this customer is ever going to want this.
Nope.
This was 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure you shipped it to them by now.
Yeah.
So, just kind of making sure that your system runs optimally is really, some things you want to pay attention to. But it's like, I don't really have time to do that, so I'm not going to do that. So it's one of those things people put on the back burner, and it is pretty easy to, get some improvements and efficiencies if you take a look at that stuff once a year.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, Kim, thanks so much for being here with us to talk about system administration. So I know that there are people out there who need your help and need to talk to you about the things that they can do to improve their Business Central.
Thanks for having me, Carrie. It's always fun to talk about super nerdy concepts like this.
It sure is. I'm Carrie Peters. Thank you for tuning in to the Get Your New View podcast. For more episodes like this on YouTube, click the subscribe button and ring the bell to ensure that you get notified whenever new content comes out. If you're listening to the audio podcast, please share an honest review on Apple Podcasts. If you are ready to rethink today for tomorrow, look for the link below and contact us to speak with our expert team. You won't find the level of no-nonsense real-world experience we offer anywhere else, and we're here to put that experience to work for you. Do you think you could use more features of your software if you just knew how? Are you frustrated with inefficiency that never seems to get better? Did your team ever really get good training to understand how to use your business software? Do you suspect there just has to be a better way and you don't know what it is? We believe every company can benefit from increased efficiency and higher utilization of their software, and that it's possible to have fun while learning exactly how to do that. The experts at NewView Strategies work with frustrated Business Central and NAV users who struggle to use their system and find the answers they need. We teach them to truly understand how the system can support their business processes to make immediate and lasting improvements. As a result, they get more done in less time, make better business decisions, and even love their system. Please contact us at getyournewview.com to get started.